It is the top of the hour, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar, Upload and Tagging of Microsoft 365 Content Made Easy. We appreciate everyone joining us today, and the first thing I'd like to do is just take a second and introduce our speakers. My name is Shayna Horka, and I'm the Product Marketing Manager here at Gimel. I'm joined by our key speaker today, Gimel's Director of Engineering, Dean Misenhimer. Now, before we get started, I have just a few housekeeping items to go through. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, feel free to submit them in the Q&A section on your screen, and we'll answer as many as we have time for at the end of the presentation. There will be at least one poll question that you'll see pop up, so please keep an eye out for that. And as always, if you have any technical difficulties, please let us know so we can assist you. So to kick things off, I have just a couple of slides here to tell you a little bit about Gimel and how we can help you take control of your information with our suite of solutions. Founded in 2002, Gimel is a records, information management, and governance software company that helps you balance the value your information provides with the risk it also presents. Whether you're trying to discover information in unstructured data sources, quickly respond to data requests, or comply with policies across multiple sources, Gimel can help you achieve your information governance goals. We have a client success team and a global network of partners that deliver solutions in conjunction with key partners like Microsoft and SAP. Gimel's family of software products work together to let you create an efficient digital workplace. Our comprehensive solutions include records management, content governance for SharePoint, document management for SAP solutions, and Altitude, a file analysis solution. Now to dive a little bit deeper into how Gimel helps you balance the value and risk of your information. We do this in two ways, by helping you discover and govern information. For the purpose of this webinar, we'll focus on governing. We help you achieve a unified view across all systems and manage the full life cycle of information from a central location. Our solutions put policy on your information where it already exists, so you know that it is retained and disposed of in a compliant manner. Our products often result in large cost savings through optimizing and leveraging infrastructure you may already own, such as Microsoft 365. But without further ado, I'll go ahead and hand it over to Dean so he can get started.
Thank you, Shayna. So, Microsoft and Gimel have a long collaboration together. Gimel's been around 18 years, and in that entire time, we've worked with the Microsoft platform in various iterations, starting with SharePoint on-premise, all the way through Microsoft 365 today. And as Shayna mentioned, our focus has always been around information governance, so areas like risk mitigation, ensured information compliance, full lifecycle management, improved collaboration, and really consistency across the enterprise, helping clients put together good information architectures and deploy SharePoint in a way that made it usable, right, and added value to their user base. We've been a Microsoft Gold partner for that entire time. And now most recently, with the introduction of SharePoint Syntex, Gimel has been designated a preferred partner in the Microsoft Content Services Partner Program. If you're not familiar with Syntex, it's the first product from the Project Cortex initiative that uses advanced AI and machine teaching to apply human expertise, automate content processing, and transform content into knowledge, which fits in well with our topic today. So Gimel is in a prime position to assist our customers in developing and deploying solutions around SharePoint Syntex. So, your organization has standardized on Microsoft 365. That's the cloud platform of the future. And there's a lot of great reasons why. Microsoft 365, in addition to SharePoint, which is going to be our focus today, there's a tremendous amount of services across the platform. The authoring applications like Office and Office Online, email, collaboration tools like Teams, the intelligence products now like Syntex that have rolled out and others, and even the security and compliance tools, right? There's a lot of great services in the Microsoft 365 platform. But if you don't deploy it properly and you don't put information into the platform that's well described, then that information doesn't offer the value that it can, and the services in the platform aren't allowed to take full advantage of it. And that's really what we're going to focus on, is how to get information in a proper manner. So let's talk a little bit. I mentioned information architecture at the beginning. What does that mean and why does it matter? Well, your information architecture is what helps you organize all of the important information from your company or your organization so that in Microsoft 365, you can more easily store it, you can find it, you can then use that information, and you can put the right controls around it to control how that information is used and how long it's kept. That's what an information architecture is. And if you don't put a good information architecture in place, that's where you start to run into these problems down the road. And we've all heard it in different companies that, oh, the users hate SharePoint. Well, they don't hate SharePoint. They hate how SharePoint was deployed and how the information is stored and organized in it because they don't have the information architecture in place. So here's a real simple visual example. You go to the store. Price is no object. Everything's the same price. It's $1. Okay, everything's $1. You see 2 cans of soup sitting on the shelf. Which one gives you an idea of what it is? Which one is more descriptive? Which one, quite frankly, are you probably going to buy? Right? And it's a funny example, but it's also very true. If everything I look at in Microsoft 365, if every time I go and look at a document, all I can see is a file name and maybe a title, and that's all the information I have, I don't know what it is. I know it might be a Word doc because I can look at the icon. Beyond that, it depends on how creatively somebody named it or gave it a title, right? Having descriptive information is paramount to getting the value out of your information and making that information more valuable. So here's another look at the same thing. You know, SharePoint operates around content types and around metadata properties. So why do I need them? What's the benefit of that? Well, a content type is like a reusable bucket for classifying content. It's a collection of the settings and the metadata properties that help describe a document. And the great thing about the way content types work in SharePoint is you can have parent-child relationships. You can inherit information from a parent down to a child. So here's a simple example, right? We're going to use automobiles. Well, the metadata is the property that describes the content type, the individual properties about that content type. You may hear metadata referred to by different terms. You may hear it called site columns, or you may hear it called terms or term stores or term sets, or it may be called properties, or it may just be called metadata. It kind of depends on who's talking about it, what their background is, and where they came from. So if we look at the example of vehicles, right? Well, there are different types of vehicles. There are cars, there are trucks, there are hybrids, there's electric vehicles, there's motorcycles. They're all vehicles. So in SharePoint, I could create a content type for each one, and I could put metadata columns on each one. The problem is if I ever want to add a metadata column or I ever want to remove a metadata column, I have to go change every one. But what I can also do is I can create a parent type called a vehicle, because they're all vehicles, and all vehicles have a make, a model number, a vehicle ID number, a year, a color, and an owner. That's common whether it is a motorcycle, a Prius, or a Lamborghini, right? Or a Mack truck. They all have that same information. But I can create a child type called a truck that now adds some additional metadata that is unique and specific to a truck. What type of truck is it? Diesel? Gasoline? What's the load weight? How much can it carry? What's the towing capacity? Right? For a car, I may have other information that's unique, or for a motorcycle, I may have other information that's unique. But the child inherits all of the metadata of the parent. And so now later on, if I want to go out and I want to search using this metadata, I could search for every vehicle from 2015. or greater that's black. And I'm going to get cars and trucks and motorcycles and hybrids and electric vehicles and everything. But maybe I want to narrow that down and I only want to search for Ford trucks that are 3/4 ton and above. Now I can use the combination of the metadata, right? So having that information architecture and having that descriptive metadata allow me to begin to do more with my information. And SharePoint is a data-driven architecture. It really lets you take advantage of that. If you've come from a legacy ECM application or you're used to using file systems, everything gets organized into folder structures. And you have folders with folders inside of folders and folders inside of those folders, and things get nested down. And that's fine because it's a very nice organizational structure. It's very structured, but it's also very rigid. You can't easily change that. You can't easily get a different view of the information. Well, in SharePoint, and here's a screenshot of a legal library we'll be looking at later on. Well, it organizes information into lists, and I can kind of change the view on these lists very quickly by just using that metadata column information. So here's a view of my list. And if you look closely at the end date column there on the right, there's a little down arrow. I've actually sorted, not in alphabetical order by name, but I've sorted by the contract end date. But I could just as easily come over and click on the contract type column, and I could group everything by my contract type metadata column. Because if I've got 100 contracts in this library, I may not want to have to scroll through them all. I may want to quickly group them and then collapse the groups I'm not interested in. I can do that with a single mouse click in the view. Or maybe I want to have an alternate view that shows different information because I'm a different type of user. I'm interested in other information that the more common users aren't. Or I only care about my contracts. So now I'm going to come in and I'm going to filter that view by the created by column, and I only want to see contracts that were created by Dean because I only care about my stuff. So here's our first poll question. Do you use content types and metadata in SharePoint Online today? Yes, you have a few basic content types. Yes, you've got a lot of content types, and you can actually have too many. That can be a different problem. No, everything is just a document, or I don't know. Let us know kind of how your information architecture is set up today. As I mentioned, not having any content types and having too many content types can both be a problem, right? Going back to that example I used of, I have electric cars and I have gasoline cars and I have electric trucks and hybrid trucks and I've got motorcycles and I've got, and you create a content type for everything, you wind up with kind of content type overload. So it takes some thought and it takes some planning to think about, how do we want to view our information? How do we want to search for our information? How might we want to control security on our information? And so here's our poll results. Relatively evenly split, I would say. About 37% said no, everything is just a document. But another 50% of you either have some basic content types or you have a lot of content types. So kind of an interesting breakout there. So the challenges of not having a good information architecture is it creates barriers to user adoption. Back to that, our users hate SharePoint. It's not SharePoint they hate, it's because they can't use it effectively, right? One is sometimes they feel, if they're used to working with a file system, well, suddenly there's more steps involved to uploading a document. Right? I got to navigate to the site. I got to click upload. I got to find my document. I got to click upload. And now if you're using the modern experience, the modern UI in Microsoft 365, one of the dangers is as a user, I can upload content, but I don't get prompted for any metadata. It's up to the user to go back and fill the metadata in. So you can wind up getting, even if you have content types, documents uploaded without the metadata being filled in. One of the other frustrations is there are just too many metadata fields to fill in. You get kind of overboard with metadata, and you create a metadata column for every little niche piece of information that you may need, and it overwhelms the user, because to force the behavior of filling in metadata, SharePoint administrators make them all mandatory, or make a bunch of them mandatory. And suddenly, to upload a document, I've got 7 mandatory fields I always have to fill out, and 7 other ones that are optional for every single document. Well, what happens is users quickly figure out how to bypass that. Or you get what's called the Afghanistan effect. You set up pull downs because you're going to be a nice guy and you're going to make it easier on your user. So you set up a pull down, and it's got a list. And one of those fields is country. Well, if the most commonly used country isn't at the top of the list and the rest of the list is alphabetical, if you look at a list of countries, do you know what the first country is? I bet you can guess. Afghanistan. So the users just pick the first choice on the list because that's easier. And you wind up with bad data. Think of your own behavior when you're browsing a website. If you go to a website and it needs you to pick your country and your country's not at the top, do you scroll all the way through? Or if you have to pick, let's say, date of birth, and you have to scroll down to the year you were born, well, depending on the year you were born, you may have to scroll further. Some of us have to scroll further than others. And if it's not a well-designed UI, at some point you just kind of get fed up and just click a date just so you can move on. Right? You get bad data, and that's not what you want. So how do you get user buy-in? How do you achieve it? Make the process as non-disruptive as you can. Streamline the upload process. Auto-populate metadata wherever you can. If you're uploading documents into a legal site, you may be able to set some metadata properties to legal. Users just want to get their job done, right? And to get their buy-in, if you do have to add a few extra steps, and that's very well true, show them value in the process, right? Generate some quick wins, create some custom views so they can see different ways they can view the information. Show them how they can use search now to search against those extra properties. Create dashboard, a couple of simple dashboards in Power BI that leverage that data. And now suddenly they're seeing value for the extra step or two you're putting in front of them, and they'll buy in. Gimel makes it easier with Gimel Cloud drop zones. It helps to streamline that process. Drop zones are hosted in the Gimel Cloud. There's nothing to install into Microsoft 365. And it's a point-and-click configuration. And I'll show you these in real time here in a moment. But I can point and click to configure these as a SharePoint administrator. They can be security protected. So depending on who I log in as, I'll see different zones that only apply to me. And it gives users a wizard-based approach to uploading content. It will lead them through the process and automate that whole process of uploading content. So let's take a little look at that, about how we can kind of automate this process. So I'm in SharePoint now. You should see a SharePoint legal site. So in my legal site here, I've got libraries set up for different types of legal documents. So we're going to go to contracts. Well, I've got a bunch of contracts loaded in here, right? Got a little network latency today. There we go. So I've got a bunch of contracts loaded in here today. Sorry about that. And I want to upload some new contracts. Well, again, out of the box, I got to come to upload, click on files, go to my my files menu, choose the document that I want to upload. There's a number of steps that have to be taken to make that happen. Well, Gimel's Cloud drop zones are designed to make that easier. So drop zones let me create these hotspots on a web page that can allow me to drag and drop content into any location. So here I've got drop zones for contracts, status reports, employee files, SAP-related documents, and I want to come in and I want to upload these 2 documents. So I'm just going to grab those 2 documents and drag and drop them on my contracts drop zone. Well, you see, they quickly get uploaded. I get a status about where they've been uploaded. And now I click Next, and it takes me to the wizard. So I can see here I've got contracts. They're going to go to Legal 2. I've got properties that are sticky, because here you see my two documents. Sticky properties are going to apply to both documents. I can click on a pull down. This could be a manage metadata term set. I select legal. I can put an end date in for these contracts. We'll just make it Halloween next year. And then I can go and I can fill out metadata that may be unique to each document, right? So I may have some metadata that is unique to each document. I may have some metadata that is common to all, and those are my sticky properties. And then if I click details, it shows me the specifics. Here's the repository we're putting it in. It's SharePoint Online. Here's the path of where that repository, where these documents are going to be uploaded. And now I click Submit. Well, once I click Submit, what happens is the documents are automatically going to get uploaded, put into SharePoint, put into my contracts library. The content type will be set, and all of the metadata will be applied. I can also organize my drop zones into a structure, because in a production environment, especially if you have thousands of users, you could wind up with a lot of drop zones. So I could actually come in here and organize these into a nice clean folder structure. And again, you can set up permissions to control who can see which zones. And so now I want to drop information on one of my SAP related zones, because I'm going to upload information to SharePoint that will be linked back to an SAP transaction. In this case, we're going to choose a plant maintenance related document. Whoops, we already have a batch being uploaded, so we can't do that at the moment. But I can upload a document to SAP or to SharePoint. I can store it. I can enter one piece of metadata, and I can have that linked to my SAP transaction, so that now my SAP users can see it. It's in SharePoint. My SharePoint users can see it, and everybody's happy. So let's try that one more time, see if that other batch is done uploading. There we go. I was just a little too much of a hurry there. And so now you see I'm only going to be prompted for one piece of information. And that's the maintenance notification ID. I click Submit. And again, my document's getting uploaded, it's getting put into SharePoint, and then in the background, Gimmel's document management for SAP product is linking it to SAP, and I'll show you another neat trick. It's going to pull down some more metadata as well. So while we were busy doing that, you see that our other two documents here uploaded into my contracts library. We have some metadata applied. If we switch our view and we go to a view that shows more metadata, you'll see some of the other information that was actually applied. So here you can see the title that I entered, the originating organization, the end date, right? That metadata got applied. And so, you know, now if I wanted to come in here and I wanted to quickly, let's say, you know, group by the contract type, I can take advantage of that metadata, and I can do that. Now, I mentioned, boy, there's a little latency today. Sorry about that. Anyway, I can also do the same thing with content for any other site in the system. Because another way that I can automate the application of metadata is I dragged and dropped this document on an SAP related zone. It put the document into SharePoint. We filled in one piece of metadata, and then Gimmel's document management for SAP queried SAP and pulled down all of the other metadata automatically from SAP and populated the metadata using the one piece of information that I asked the user for. That's how you automate the process. That's how you make it easier on the user. You give me one piece of information, I can pull in all of the other information for you. And so now as you want to do things like go out and search for documents, maybe I want to use Gimmel's enhanced search. I search for the term Berlin. it goes out and pulls back every document now that is in Microsoft 365 related to the term Berlin, whether the properties match that or a full text search matches that, and we can display all of that metadata as part of our search results, right? So it begins to give you a lot of power in what you can do and how you can automate the life of the end user. And then overall, from a big picture point of view, you can now start to put effective governance policies in place. Because if I have well-described information in Microsoft 365, I've got that good information architecture defined, I've got the building blocks in place, now I can surround that framework with very effective governance policies and records management policies, which is a topic for another day, but now I can trigger retention. I can classify records based on all of that property, right? That's the power of what this gives me overall when you have well-described content. So this is our last poll question, and then we'll go to questions. I saw a bunch of questions popping up in the Q&A panel. Would you like to schedule a live demonstration of GIML governance for SharePoint, which is what we were showing here today, or quite frankly, any of our other products? Yes or not at this time. And while everyone answers the poll, Shana, do we want to go ahead and start in on the questions?
Yep. Okay, so the first question we have is regarding the recording of this webinar. I can go ahead and answer that one. We're going to send out the recording via a thank you email, a thank you for attending email, within 24 to 48 hours. The next question we have is, how does the user know mandatory versus optional fields in a drop zone input form?
Great question. In the configuration of the zone, you can mark certain fields as mandatory. You can also mark certain fields as read-only, where I can show it to the user and I can have a pre-populated value, but they can't change it. So that's configurable in the zone. You can mark something as mandatory where they would have to fill it out.
The next question we have is, could you use Power Automate to query metadata to auto-populate easily?
You could. I think you could absolutely take advantage of Power Automate to do some additional automation to, as a user, maybe I upload something, I put in 1 or 2 basic pieces of information that stores in a library. At that point, Power Automate could pick it up and really do anything you want to with it, right? Move it anywhere you want, add additional metadata to it, right? It opens up a world of possibilities, and that kind of goes back to you've got all this power of the platform there, right?
The next question we have is, can you show how the drop zone is configured?
Yeah, I don't have time for that in the webinar today, since this is a 30-day webinar, but
30 minute 30
yeah,
minute 30 day
30 minutes, sorry. But yeah, be happy to set something up and actually walk you through that. It's, as I mentioned, it's pretty point and click. So we can set a session up for you and walk you through that in probably 30 minutes or so.
And unless another one sneaks in, the last question we have is, can zones apply metadata without displaying it to the user?
They can. So part of that configuration, as I mentioned, is you can actually click a metadata property to be hidden from the user. So, if I'm dropping something on the contract zone that's going to upload it to the legal site, I may automatically set the organization to legal in the background and never display that to the user, because that's going to be driven by where they're putting the content, right? So you can have metadata that the user will never see.
Great, well, that wraps up the questions. So if you want to go to the next slide.
Oh, sorry.
And if anyone has any more questions, the next slide should show, yeah, right there, our contact information. You can email either one of us with any follow-up questions, or you can email info@giml.com, or just visit our website, submit a form there to ask your questions as well. For those interested in the recording, like I said, we will be giving it out between 24 to 48 hours in the form of a thank you email. And we hope to see everyone again in our next webinar next week. Dean mentioned it a little bit earlier on how to leverage SharePoint syntax for enhanced records management. We hope you all enjoyed today's webinar and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you, everyone.